It houses the engines and all the structure to carry the rest of the wing.
Whoa, look at this. There are millions of them.
From once promising inventions to mysterious vehicles left to rust, some technologies disappear without ever making it mainstream. What led to their downfall? Were they simply too advanced, too strange, or just unlucky?
A view of what the plane is like from the inside, you see.
These forgotten creations offer a fascinating window into bold ideas that either arrived too soon or never stood a chance. In today's video, we're diving into some of the most unusual and abandoned technologies and machines ever discovered. Jetpack. For decades, sci-fi movies and TV shows have promised us a future where we all zip through the skies with personal jetpacks. No traffic jams, no waiting in line, just strap in and take off. It sounds amazing, right? The idea of personal flight has fascinated people for years, and at one point, even the military got involved, pouring millions into making jetpacks a reality. And believe it or not, they succeeded at least in a way. One of the most famous moments in jetpack history happened at the opening ceremony of the 1984 Olympics. A man flew into the stadium using a real jetpack, wowing the world. So, if we had the technology back then, why aren't we all commuting to work with rocket packs today? Well, turns out they're not exactly practical. First off, jetpacks are ridiculously expensive and their fuel isn't easy to come by. Unlike car gas, which you can pump at any station, most jetpacks run on special fuel that has to be chemically manufactured. That means even if you owned a jetpack, you'd have a tough time keeping it filled. Then there's the noise. Jetpacks are loud. The military wanted to use them for reconnaissance missions, but a stealthy approach isn't exactly possible when you sound like a rocket blasting off. And let's not forget safety. Flying a jetpack isn't as simple as strapping it on and taking off. It requires serious skill, and there's no backup system if something goes wrong. If your engine cuts out mid-flight, well, let's just say you won't be landing softly. The Mythbusters even tried making their jetpack, only to confirm what experts already knew. It's just not a great way to travel. Between the cost, the noise, the dangerous learning curve, and the fact that better alternatives exist, jetpacks remain more of a cool concept than a real-world solution. So for now, jetpacks are best left to sci-fi movies, stunt shows, and of course Iron Man. The Russian Forest Tank Squad. Tanks are pretty hard to miss. They're massive, heavy, and not exactly easy to misplace. But somehow, Russia managed to lose 200 of them. Back in February 2010, the people of Yekaterinburg were out for a stroll in the nearby forest when they stumbled upon an unbelievable sight. Hundreds of tanks just sitting there, not locked up, not guarded, just abandoned in the woods like a forgotten toy collection. Even more surprising, people could climb inside them. Thankfully, the keys and ammunition were missing, so no one could just hop in and start a joyride. But that didn't stop locals from being stunned. It's like you could sit behind the wheel, start the engine, and drive off, and nobody would notice. One man, Pavel, told reporters that Russia's military insisted the tanks hadn't been left unattended and were being watched. But given the thick snow covering them, that was a hard story to believe. And as soon as international attention turned to the situation, the military scrambled to remove them. To this day, it's unclear how or why they ended up there in the first place. But for many locals, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You don't get to see this every day, let alone sit in an entire battalion of tanks. Chernobyl Graveyard. When you hear Chernobyl, your mind probably jumps straight to the 1986 nuclear disaster in Ukraine. But while most people focus on the abandoned city of Pripyat and the crumbling reactor, there's another eerie sight. Left-behind tanks. At first, you might wonder what tanks had to do with a nuclear plant meltdown. But after the explosion, radiation spread over a massive area. affecting not just towns, but also military facilities nearby. And when the cleanup effort began, the military had to step in. Tanks and other armored vehicles were brought in, not just for security, but because their thick metal bodies provided some level of protection against radiation. Once the cleanup was over, these tanks were deemed too dangerous to move. The radiation clung to their surfaces, making them a hazard to anyone who might come into contact with them. So, instead of being taken away, they were simply left behind, silent, rusting reminders of the catastrophe that unfolded nearly 4 decades ago. The original maglev train. Trains have come a long way over the years, getting faster, more efficient, and more advanced with each major leap in technology. But back in the days of the USSR, there was an ambitious project that could have changed train travel forever. Project Wagon T, a 05. This wasn't just any train, it was one of the first to use magnetic levitation, or maglev technology, to glide above the tracks at incredibly high speeds. If you've heard of maglev trains, you know they now operate in various parts of the world. But this Soviet experiment was happening nearly 30 years before maglev became mainstream. The train itself looked more like a futuristic spaceship than a railcar, and it was designed to hit speeds close to 400 kilometers per hour, about 250 miles per hour. A special track was built, and test runs were conducted. Everything seemed promising until disaster struck. In 1988, a massive earthquake hit Armenia, devastating the test site. The track and crucial equipment were destroyed. The cost of repairs was so high that the project was abandoned entirely. Had things gone differently, high-speed train travel might have taken off much earlier than it did. Instead, the dream of the Soviet maglev was lost to history, leaving us to wonder what could have been. Ditched Lambo. In February 2019, a Lamborghini Huracan worth $250,000 was found abandoned in a roadside ditch in North London. Cameraman Andrew Lawrence was driving through the area early one morning when he spotted the purple supercar stuck in the wrong direction with its driver's side door pushed against the ground. The car was clearly in trouble, but the owner wasn't anywhere in sight. Now imagine how tempting it must have been for Andrew to call a tow truck and make the car disappear. After all, it was a Lamborghini, but being the good guy that he is, Andrew decided to call the police and figure out who owned the car. It turned out the car belonged to Michael Hudson, the founder of Bitstocks and a Bitcoin millionaire. Michael had been driving when the car hit a puddle, lost control, and slid into the ditch.
Side skirt damage. But the door, the wing mirror,
The side skirt on that side skirt, the door, the wing mirror. Instead of calling a tow truck, he just left the car there and walked off to get help. Luckily, the car didn't suffer much damage, and Michael was able to get it back on the road. Still, with all his wealth, maybe it's time he invests in a few driving lessons. It's an incredible car cemetery. Belgium is known for its delicious chocolate and beer, but it was also home to an interesting and mysterious scrapyard until about 10 years ago. The Châtillon Car Cemetery, located deep in the forest, had rows of old cars that looked like a forgotten traffic jam. It was an astonishing sight to see. Many of these cars were old American models, which led to rumors that they had been left behind by American forces after World War II. However, most of the cars were made years after the war ended. So what was going on? The truth came out eventually. The cars had belonged to Canadian Air Force troops. In the late 1940s, hundreds of these troops were stationed in the nearby town of Virton as part of the NATO alliance. Since the town was small, one mechanic in Châtillon was responsible for fixing all the cars. But in 1966, when France withdrew from NATO, the Canadian troops left the town, leaving behind hundreds of cars with nowhere to go. The mechanic was stuck with them. Over the years, the cars just rusted and rotted away in the small town. Sadly, all the cars were cleared away in February 2010, bringing an end to this unique piece of history. Classic car enthusiasts around the world must have been heartbroken to see them go. The Gold Train. By the final years of World War II, Nazi Germany was collapsing. With defeat looming, they started planning for the future, one that, in their minds, would eventually lead to their return. And according to legend, part of that plan involved a secret train loaded with gold, priceless artwork, and treasures hidden deep beneath Lower Silesia. In May 1945, as Soviet forces advanced, the train was supposedly sealed inside underground tunnels between Breslau, now Rokiv, and Waldenburg, now Wabjik, in what was then German territory. The idea was that one day, after the war had blown over, they could return, retrieve their riches, and rebuild. But as history shows, that never happened. The Nazis were crushed, and if the train was real, it was lost to time. For over 70 years, treasure hunters have scoured the region, convinced that the legendary gold train is still buried beneath Poland. Excitement surged in February 2015 when a construction worker on his deathbed claimed he knew its location. Radar scans even showed hidden chambers underground. But after years of searching, no train nor its supposed fortune has been found, yet the legend refuses to die. Some still believe the treasure is out there, just waiting to be uncovered. Others think it's nothing more than a wartime myth. Either way, the idea of a missing Nazi gold train continues to spark curiosity, keeping the search alive to this day. Coal cycle sales. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, a man named Cole ran a simple but effective business buying and selling motorcycles. Whether someone was looking to offload a bike or a shop needed to clear out inventory, Cole was ready to make a deal. Back then, motorcycles were a lot cheaper, so his collection quickly grew. It wasn't long before Cole had so many bikes that he needed a massive warehouse to store them all. Photos from the time show row after row of motorcycles, some of them rare and one-of-a-kind models. His business thrived for years, but eventually Cole decided to sell. Unfortunately, the new owner didn't share his passion. The collection was neglected, and the warehouse fell into disrepair. By February, things had taken a turn for the worse. The city took legal action over the state of the building, and then, mysteriously, a fire broke out. Many believe a group of teenagers set it ablaze, though the true cause was never confirmed. The once prized collection of motorcycles was reduced to ashes, abandoned, and lost to time. What was once a treasure trove of vintage bikes is now just a memory, leaving motorcycle enthusiasts to wonder what could have been saved. The Aerotrain. At first glance, the Aerotrain looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. A futuristic train floating above the tracks, powered by something other than wheels. But this wasn't just a crazy experiment. It was a real project developed by French engineer Jean Bertin between 1965 and 1977, and it had the potential to revolutionize train travel. Unlike traditional trains, the Aerotrain didn't run on wheels or magnets. Instead, it hovered on a cushion of air over a reinforced concrete guideway. This made it incredibly fast and efficient, reaching record-breaking speeds of over 270 miles per hour during test runs. Burton and his team proved it worked and even secured support to develop it further. At one point, the Aerotrain was even being considered for expansion in the United States. So, why aren't we riding hovertrains today? The answer lies with the French government. Instead of investing in this new technology, they decided it would be cheaper and easier to improve the trains they already had. The Aerotrain project was shelved, and Burton passed away without seeing his dream become a reality. If things had gone differently, we could have had high-speed, energy-efficient trains decades ago. Instead, the project was abandoned, leaving behind only test tracks and what-ifs. The Benny Railplane. Trains have been a reliable mode of transport for years. They're simple, efficient, and easy to improve, but now and then someone comes up with a wild new idea to make them even better. Enter George Benny and his ambitious plan for the railplane. The concept was simple, kind of. Instead of running on the ground, Benny's train would glide above it on elevated tracks. And instead of relying on traditional engines, it would be powered by a propeller, more like an airplane than a train. The idea was that this aerial train could transport passengers at high speeds, while traditional trains below would carry cargo, a perfect system, at least in Benny's mind. Unlike many dreamers, Benny got to build and test his invention. And to his credit, it worked. His prototype moved smoothly along the elevated rails and showed real promise. But there was a problem: money. While the rail plane turned heads and drew interest from various countries, no one was willing to invest in making it a reality. Without financial backing, Benny couldn't expand on his creation, and eventually he had to sell the whole thing for scrap. And just like that, his futuristic flying train idea was gone, never to be revived again. The Liege subway tunnel. Near the city of Liege, Belgium, there was once an ambitious plan to build an underground metro system. The idea was to create a tunnel that would connect the city to other areas in the country, improving transportation for everyone. Sounds great, right? Well, there was just one problem. The project was abandoned before it was ever completed. By the time construction stopped, much of the tunnel had already been built. But instead of just sealing it off and forgetting about it, the city found an unexpected use for the space: storage. Over time, the empty subway tunnel became a resting place for all kinds of vehicles: old trolley cars, train sections, buses, and more. What started as a temporary solution eventually grew into something much bigger. As more and more vehicles were placed in the tunnel, people began to take notice. Eventually, the space was transformed into an official transportation museum, drawing in visitors from all over. Today, tourists, live streamers, and history buffs explore the tunnels, marveling at the vast collection of forgotten transport. What's even more surprising is that the metro itself was finished. It just never opened. While some might see this as a wasted opportunity, many locals and visitors would argue that the abandoned subway-turned-museum is far more unique and interesting than just another metro line. The McBarge. Though it never had the famous golden arches, the McBarge is still tied to the McDonald's name. Built in 1986 for Vancouver's World Expo, the McBarge was a unique floating restaurant designed to bring McDonald's to the waterfront. The company spent a massive $12 million, around $26 million today, to create this one-of-a-kind spot. The restaurant, officially called the Friendship 500, was a pun-filled nod to the idea of friendship and fast food, but the name didn't exactly win any awards. It was an 8,500-square-foot floating restaurant built on a 187-foot barge, which McDonald's hoped could travel to different waterfronts around the world. During the 6-month World Expo, it became pretty popular and even earned the nickname the McBarge, which honestly was more fitting than its official name. However, the novelty wore off quickly. By 1991, the locals had lost interest, and the McBarge was moved to the quieter Burrard Inlet. But rather than becoming a new hotspot, it was abandoned and left to decay. For over 30 years, the McBarge slowly deteriorated. Graffiti and dust took over, and the inside of the restaurant, with its 1980s style, fell victim to time and vandalism. The windows were covered in grime and spray paint, and the floors and walls were filthy. At one point, old products were left on board. While it may have been a popular attraction back in the 80s, the McBarge is now a far cry from a place where you'd want to grab a bite. Holy Abandonment Batman. In my opinion, the best Batman movies are the ones with Michael Keaton. Everything about those films was classic. The costume, the gadgets, Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, and, of course, the Batmobile. Well, maybe the Batmobile doesn't look as cool now as it did back then. In February 2019, a rusted Batmobile shell from Keaton's era was found in a scrapyard. It had been there for a while, but that wasn't the only one. In 2020, another Batmobile body was discovered in a scrapyard in New York. You might be wondering how there could be more than one. Well, it turns out these weren't the original Batmobiles from the movies. Instead, they were replicas made by big Batman fans using DIY kits. As time passed and their love for Batman faded, the fans lost interest in their custom Batmobiles and decided to scrap them. But now they might regret that decision. In February 2019, one of these perfect replicas, fully functional and with 400 horsepower, was listed on eBay for a mind-blowing $680,000. Suddenly, leaving a Batmobile in a scrapyard doesn't seem like a good idea, especially when it's worth so much. Those DIY Batmobiles may have looked like junk then, but now they could have been real treasures. The Handley Page, Victor. The Cold War saw the creation of all kinds of powerful military machines, and Britain wasn't about to be left out. Enter the Handley Page Victor, a jet-powered strategic bomber designed to serve as a nuclear deterrent. It was the third and final aircraft in Britain's Phi bomber fleet, built to keep enemies in check. But despite its intimidating purpose, the Victor never actually carried out its intended role. In 1968, engineers discovered stress cracks in the plane, signs of material fatigue that made them unsafe for their original mission. Rather than scrapping them entirely, the British military decided to repurpose the Victors. Over the years, they were used for reconnaissance missions, and more notably as mid-air refueling tankers. In this new role, they played a crucial part in military operations, extending the range of fighter jets and bombers. But even this second life didn't last forever. By 1993, the Handley Page Victor was finally retired for good, closing the book on a bomber that never bombed. The ghost plane of Iceland. Iceland's volcanic beaches are famous for their striking black basalt sands, which are some of the most beautiful in the world, but there's something unexpected on one of these beaches, the Solheimarsanda plane wreck. It's the remains of a cargo plane stripped bare by years of harsh Arctic winds. While it may look like something from a post-apocalyptic movie, it's the result of a dramatic event that took place on November 21st, 1973. On that day, a 117 plane carrying a 5-man crew was heading to a US naval station in Iceland. Suddenly, temperatures dropped to a freezing 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and 60-mile-per-hour gusts of icy wind hit the plane. The cold caused the plane's engines to freeze up, and the plane came crashing down onto the beach. Miraculously, everyone on board survived without a scratch. After the crash, the US military arrived to rescue the crew. They stripped the plane of anything that could be used, cutting off its wings, removing the engines, and taking whatever was salvageable. Left behind was the 5-ton shell of the plane, which has been abandoned on the beach ever since. While it's a bit sad that the plane was left to decay, the wreck has become a popular tourist attraction in Iceland, drawing visitors from all over the world to see this haunting reminder of a close call.
A view of what the plane is like from the inside, you see.
A view of what the plane is like from the inside, you see. So, while it may have been a rough end for the plane, it's given Iceland a unique landmark for people to explore. Spooky shores of Kiska. Kiska Island, part of Alaska's Aleutian Islands, is a remote 22-mile-long landmass with no roads, no buildings, and no people. It's the kind of place where you'd never expect to find anything out of the ordinary. But if you look closely at its shores, you'll discover something surprising: old anti-aircraft guns, rusting ships, and even submarines. These abandoned relics are surprisingly well preserved, even though many of them are over 80 years old. Alaska's cold climate has helped keep these items intact, especially the Japanese type A midget submarines. These small submarines, measuring just 78 feet long and under 6 feet wide, were designed for stealthy missions to sneak into enemy waters. If caught, they were small enough for Japan to claim they were just used for target practice. But these submarines weren't just for show. They were armed with torpedoes, and some were even part of the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. So how did these submarines end up on Kiska Island? The answer lies in a little-known battle during World War II. During the war, Kiska was home to an American weather station, which was captured by the Japanese. In response, American and Canadian forces launched a year-long air campaign to reclaim the island. In 1943, the Japanese Navy quickly retreated from the Aleutian Islands, but not before they blew up their ships and submarines, preventing their enemies from using them. While this battle might not be well known in history books, the story of the Japanese retreat in their attempt to destroy their equipment out of spite, is one for the history buffs. Today, those rusting remnants of war still sit on the shores of Kiska, waiting to tell their story. Rusting river rockets. Back in 1957, the Soviet Union created something truly amazing: hydrofoil boats. These boats could travel way faster than regular ones because they used submerged wings to lift themselves out of the water. This drastically reduced drag, allowing them to skim over the surface like a stone skipping across a pond. Known as Replica, these Russian river rockets could zoom along waterways at a top speed of 43 miles per hour, more than 3 times faster than boats of similar size at the time. They were a big hit, carrying passengers on fast, smooth rides. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, many of these boats couldn't be properly maintained. As a result, they were abandoned and left to rust in ship graveyards. In the photos, you'll see boats called Meteors, which were an upgraded version of the Replica. The Meteor was even faster and could carry up to 160 passengers. But today, most of these old boats are rotting away in a forest near the Herkimer reservoir close to the city of Perm. Despite their dilapidated state, they still look just as majestic as they did during their prime, a reminder of their former glory. The abandoned Blue Wonder. In the lush green meadows of Schipkau, Germany, there's an abandoned attraction that stands out. Towering nearly 170 feet into the sky, this massive machine looks like it could be a weapon built to battle King Kong. With a giant rusty chainsaw-like wheel at the front, it's hard to miss. When urban explorers first discovered it back in February 2002, they thought it was a Bagger 258, a huge bucket wheel excavator used in mining. The way it worked was simple yet impressive. As the giant wheel turned, the massive buckets attached to it scooped up dirt and dumped it onto a conveyor belt for processing. It was like a moving factory on tank-like tracks, crawling along at a speed of just 20 feet per minute. But after more explorers visited, they realized this wasn't a Bagger 258 at all. Instead, it was a Bagger 1473. Built in 1965, this beast was once called the Blue Wonder because of its striking blue paint job. Each bucket could hold 52 cubic feet of dirt, and in less than 150 full rotations, it could scoop up enough earth to fill an Olympic swimming pool. Sadly, this amazing machine was left behind in February 2002. It had run out of things to dig, and moving such a massive and costly machine wasn't practical. Today, it stands as a protected landmark, offering a unique sight for photographers. For those daring enough, it could even make for an unforgettable rope swing. Just imagine the thrill of swinging from a giant excavator. Lonely Lun-class Ekranoplan. When it comes to abandoned vehicles, the Soviet Union's craziest creation might just be the Lun-class Ekranoplan. This top-secret military vehicle was a giant, 242 feet long, and used a special trick called the wing and ground effect to move. This effect happens when an aircraft gets close to the ground, and the air pressure between the wings and the surface below creates a cushion of air. With its unique wings, the Ekranoplan could glide just inches above the ocean or a lake, making it hard to detect by enemy ships. Powered by 8 turbojets at the front, this huge machine could reach speeds of 340 miles per hour, combining the speed of an airplane with the capacity of a boat. Sadly, only one prototype of the Ekranoplan was ever finished before the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Known as the Caspian Sea Monster, this massive machine was left to sit on a guarded dock in Russia's Dagestan region. For almost 30 years, it was forgotten until it finally got some attention in July 2020. The plan was to move it to a new museum, and it was towed almost 100 kilometers over the Caspian Sea. But when it reached the sandy shores of Derbent, it ran aground. Weighing a mind-boggling 264 tons, the Ekranoplan was too heavy to pull back to shore. As a result, it remained stuck on the beach for another 5 months. Watching kids play around such a massive war machine might just be the most Russian thing ever. The Herkimer battle Jitney. Scrapyards are full of abandoned vehicles, but some stand out more than others. One such example was discovered in a surplus yard in America, a triple-axle six-wheel vehicle that looks like nothing else. This vehicle is truly one of a kind. So why was it sitting in a scrapyard? It turns out this isn't just some forgotten project. This vehicle has a bit of fame attached to it. If you're too young to remember The Mystery Men, it's a 90s movie about a group of superheroes who weren't exactly good at their jobs, but still tried to save a city from destruction. In the movie, the heroes get a huge strange vehicle called the Herkimer Jitney. It looks so real in the film that some people thought it was an actual military vehicle. Maybe even a Z-17 Marauder, a heavy troop vehicle used by the US government. But in reality, the Jitney was a custom-built creation made just for the movie. Its base was a 1979 Ford semi-truck, but the cab was removed, and the body was made from a modified Airstream camper. The vehicle's unique design meant it couldn't be reused in other films.
The field to ride the Herkimer Jitney this year.
The field to ride the Herkimer Jitney this year, so after filming, it was abandoned. No W, instead of being a movie star, the Herkimer Jitney is just sitting in a scrapyard, slowly gathering dust. But who knows? Maybe one day it'll get a second chance and have a superhero ending after all. The Vacant Victor. Until 2020, the gates of Marham's Royal Air Force Base in England were guarded by a massive aircraft, the Handley Victor. This British jet-powered strategic bomber was designed in the 1950s during the Cold War.
It houses the engines and all the structure to carry the rest of the wing.
It houses the engines and all the structure to carry the rest of the wing. At over 140 feet long, with a wingspan of 110 feet, the Victor could carry up to 17 points, 5 tons of bomb, or, if needed, one 5-ton free-fall gravity bomb, also known as a very big nuke. These bombers made quite an impression when they flew. But after the Cold War ended in 1991, there wasn't much need for them. The last Handley Victor was retired in 1993, but maintaining these aircraft was so expensive that the RAF started giving them away to the public for free. However, very few people had the space or resources to house such massive planes. Some ended up in museums, while others, like this one, were left to deteriorate. At RAF Marham, this Victor was used for drills, firefighting and target practice. The plane was stripped of its parts, with the windscreens blown out and the interior blackened by fire. It eventually met its end when it was scrapped in 1995. Seeing this vintage Cold War bomber reduced to nothing more than a charred husk is a sad sight. The strangest abandoned technologies and vehicles give us a fascinating glimpse into the past and the oddities of human innovation. Whether they were ahead of their time or just too quirky for their good, they remind us of the creative ways we've tried to push boundaries. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more mind-blowing discoveries.